Hello everyone. I miss all of you so much, and I hope that each of you are doing well, and if you've started school, that you had a great start to your school year. And I'm excited that I'm going to get to go through some Sunday school lessons with you, and we get to learn together even though it's virtually. So we're going to go ahead and get started. First, we're going to set up your worship area. So can you reach into your box that you received from church and get out this bag? Today, we will be using the green cloth, this green cloth here. Because we are in what the church calls ordinary time, which is just a fancy way of saying that we don't have any holidays going on right now. So you are going to lay out your green cloth and put your tea light and cross on it. Both those things are in your bag. You can take a few seconds to get quiet and ready to learn. You can also do a quick prayer to God if you'd like to. So take a few minutes to get your worship area set up. There is a Godly Play video for today. You can either watch it after this lesson, or you can pause this now and click on the link in the email. Now, let's get started. We have all new lessons this year, and part of those new lessons is this book. It's titled Growing in God's Love. For each lesson we have this year, there is a story in this book that goes with it. We're beginning this year at the beginning of the Bible with lessons about creation and God's promises. In Genesis, the first book in the Bible, there are actually 2 stories of creation written by 2 different people in 2 different ways. Each story shares something that the writers wanted people to know about the beginning of the world. Today's lesson is the story that you all probably know the best and tells about how God created the world day by day for 7 days. But before we move into our lesson, let's start by hearing an overview of the first 3 lessons with beginning with creation and God's promises. I'm going to open up our book and I'm going to read our introduction. And it looks like this. Beginning with creation and God's promises. Every culture has a story about how it began. For Christians, this story is told in the first book of the Bible. Genesis starts with 2 stories of creation. Chapters 1 and 2 in Genesis invite us to think about how God is connected with creation. From the smallest insect to the largest elephant, from the teeniest lichen to the giant redwood tree, even with us, God is the focus of these stories. They do not give us a specific explanation of how the world came into being, but they do help us understand God's presence in all creation then and now. As you hear these stories, notice the role God plays and the role that humans play in these stories of beginnings. After the world and all that was in it was created, The writers of the next books told stories about how God made God's self known to the humans whom God had created. Like all people everywhere, they were trying to figure out how to live with one another. Sometimes they were good at it, but often they made mistakes, just like you and me. God wanted them to remember how to live with kindness and care toward one another and toward the earth and all living things. God made promises to them, and God wanted them to remember these promises. An important way that God connects or relates to people, us, is through covenants. A covenant is a promise between God and God's people. God promises to be God, and the people promise to follow in God's ways. In the Old Testament, God's people were the Hebrews, and later they were called Israelites. Read about the promises God made to Noah, to Abraham and Sarah, and to the prophet Jeremiah. God's promises then and now help us remember that God is always with us at the beginning of our lives, in the middle, and at the end. So now, for the lesson today, How God Made Everything, I will read this story. It's a picture of the story we're going to read today, titled How God Made Everything. While I read this story, why don't you try and listen for how God is described in the story? So everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started with our story. Let's listen up. Long ago, before telescopes and microscopes, before scientists discovered everything they know today, people told stories about the beginning of the world. This is the story about the beginning of the world that the people of God told. They thought everything God made was beautiful. At first, it was really hard to see. Water was everywhere, so God made light. The light you see every morning when you wake up. When God saw the light, God said, "It's beautiful." Then God moved the water around. Some of it God spread all over the world. Some of it God put up in the clouds in the sky for rain. God said, "Water's beautiful too." After that, God put the world's water in the oceans and lakes and rivers. Then the dry ground you walk on appeared. In the ground, God planted grass and trees and everything that grows outside your window and outside everyone's window. God made the geranium in the little pot on your windowsill too. And God said, "Aren't all these plants beautiful?" To make sure we have light, day, and night, God made the big sun that you see every day. Then God made the moon and the stars you see when you lie on your back on the ground at night. And God said, "Don't you think they're beautiful too?" Finally, God made all the animals everywhere, the fish and the crabs and the whales in the water and the birds flying up with the clouds in the sky. God made all the animals around us on the ground. Then God made us, people. And God said, "Wow, you're all beautiful." Then God spoke to us for the first time. God told us who we are and what we should do. God said, "You are all my people in the world. I made. I made you just enough like me that you too can see how beautiful everything is. Take care of the world. Keep it beautiful. Keep it just as beautiful as I made it. I hope you enjoyed that story. So, even though we're not together right now, we're going to talk a little bit about this story. You can either think your answers in your head, you can draw or write them down in your notebooks or pads, or you can talk about the questions with a brother or sister or family member or friend if they're watching with you, okay? So let's go. So the first question to think about or to draw about is, how does God sound in this story? What is your favorite part of the story? I think my favorite part is when God made light. I love seeing the sunshine in the morning. What's your favorite part of creation? The animals, the people. Now, close your eyes and imagine the world as it looked after the final day that God worked in. Do you think that it looked the same as it does now? What do you think God would say about how we are taking care of the world He created? And are there things that we could be doing better? Now, I want you to think about the world around you right now. Can you hear any sounds from outdoors? Maybe wind blowing or birds singing? Can you see anything in nature that you are thankful for? Like trees for shade when it's hot outside, or blooming flowers that make the world colorful and smell good? Can you see anything beautiful outside?